Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we've got something a little bit different, so a little less formal than usual. I'm going to do a Q&A. I'm here with my Crash Bandicoot mug. Why not? You know, there's a new game coming out soon, really looking forward to that. So I recently put up a post over on Instagram where I asked basically any of you to send me any questions that you might have, whether that be about projects, whether it's about me personally, or advice on 3D printers and that kind of thing. And I actually had quite a few responses, so I kind of picked a lot of the most relevant questions, or the ones that I thought would be most beneficial to everyone. So I think there's around 16 altogether that I chose. So I'm going to go through those, answer them, and yeah, hopefully you kind of get a bit of insight and you get to know me a little bit better as well. So question 1, what is your background? And I get asked this question all the time. I actually only graduated from university around 3 years ago, so I'm still relatively new as an engineer in what I'm doing. But my degree was in electronics and embedded systems. The actual course was called Computer Systems Engineering, but it was kind of a mixture of hardware and software. So you've got the electronic side, the hardware side, where we studied Renesas chips and how to program and configure those. And then obviously there was stuff in there, the logic, everything in electronics, communications, all the important stuff. But then there was the other side of it, which was kind of computer science, where we were doing website stuff, database, app design. So really had quite a broad range of things that I studied. And that really helped me in deciding kind of what path I wanted to go down, the things I wasn't too fussed on. And it was a great course in that aspect because it was so broad, but at the same time I felt like it didn't really specialise in anything in particular. My biggest gain from the course was definitely the electronic stuff and the embedded systems. That's ultimately led me to where I am now, and that's the stuff that I am truly passionate about. That's what I love doing. Kind of making stuff, programming boards, designing circuits. I love that stuff. Question 2, how and why did you get into 3D printing? And that's actually a really good question, and it's quite interesting to think about as well, because when I think back, I always kind of knew that 3D printing existed. And when I was doing my degree, or towards the end, probably around 4, maybe 5 years ago, there was a 3D printer at the campus, and in order to use it for any of our projects, we had to pay. It was something like, it was either £50 or £100 just to print one thing, and it was crazy, right? That even that was really low cost then for students. But before that, even if you didn't have a lot of money, there was no real way to design and manufacture your own parts for your own projects, especially at home. 3D printing in general has really opened that up in the maker community in terms of enabling people to create things that they're interested in, right? And that's kind of what I've been doing with my RC project. For me to try and do something like that 5 years ago, it'd almost be impossible unless you had a really large amount of money and you were able to send parts off to be 3D printed. But that's a huge hassle because, as you've seen in my videos, a lot of those kind of projects are really rapid R&D projects. So you try something out, it doesn't work, you go back, change the design, try it again, that kind of thing. But I first actually got my hands on a 3D printer at work. So one of the guys I work with, he had ordered the printer for the organisation that I work for, and he introduced me to it. It was the first time I'd really seen it and got my hands on it, and it just blew me away. You know, I just watched it doing its thing for the first time, and it was a Prusa i3 Mark II. So it was the Mark II, which is still an awesome printer. Yeah, it just blew me away watching it and how it was pumping out these parts in no time at all. And as soon as I saw that, I just knew, right, I'm going to buy my own printer. And I did. Around 2 years ago, I bought the Prusa Mark III, which is when I started documenting my projects and sharing them with you guys. So to sum that one up, really, the reason I got into it was because I've always loved making stuff, and having a 3D printer is probably the best tool you can own, if I'm being honest. Question 3, what type of filament do you use? I only really use 2, if I'm honest. I stick with PLA and PETG. And the reason I stick with those is because I've never really needed anything more. That has changed in the last week or so with the Raptor project, and I actually got my hands on some Polymax polycarbonate filament, and there's some information coming about that soon in the next Raptor video. But the way I've always kind of approached it is I only tend to buy the filaments that I need. I'm not the type to go and spend a lot of money on some of these kind of exotic filaments when I don't really have a need for it. That being said, there are other things I'd like to try, but that is another question, so I'll get on to that in a second. Question 4. Why do you use Fusion 360 to design for your projects? The reason I started using it was because it was free. And I've known Autodesk have always had an awesome reputation. I've used Autodesk Inventor in the past, back in school, a long time ago. Fusion 360 is quite unique in the sense that it offers something to everyone. Personally, I think what you get for the cost with Fusion 360 is incredible. They have recently made changes to the personalized license or the free license, where they've kind of limited you on file formats and that kind of thing. That is disappointing to hear, but that's an entirely separate video, and that was always kind of going to come, right? That's kind of how you market things. You give a little bit of it away for free, and then when people start using it and start enjoying it, you slap a big monthly fee on it, and that's just how it works, unfortunately. But that being said, honestly, it is worth it. If you want to pay for it and you want access to the full package, it's totally worth it. It's an incredible piece of software. Question 5. Are you going to add any AI to your RC car? That is an awesome question, and it's something that I've definitely thought about. So, I have a lot of experience in machine learning, artificial intelligence. It's actually what I do for a living. That's kind of what I do as my day job. I work for an R&D team, and we do R&D with machine learning. And it really has crossed my mind whether I can add some kind of computer vision or autonomy to this Raptor project. I think that would make it very, very unique and extremely interesting. So to answer your question, yes, probably, but it won't be for a while. I really want to focus on the car and the mechanics of the car first, get it performing really well. And then when that project kind of expires a bit, I'll start looking into other things, and AI and machine learning is definitely one of those things. And it'd be really cool if I could even get like a Jetson Nano board on there from NVIDIA. That would be so cool. And yeah, that is 100% something that I'm considering. Question 6. Why did you start the Raptor project, and how much money do you plan to spend on it? The reason I started the Raptor project, in all honesty, was just to learn. It was to learn about CAD, enhance my skill set, and it was a way for me to bring everything I enjoy together in one project. So usually with 3D printing, people just tend to print these little mechanical contraptions or simple little figures or models, and that's cool, but it gets to a point where you're kind of like, okay, what can I do with this 3D printing stuff that's actually practical and has some kind of use? And for me, I thought about that a lot, and one of the best things I could think of was to design an RC car. So what I did was I kind of looked at what's already out there. I had a look at the designs, could I replicate that kind of thing with 3D printing? What I love about it is it brings the electronics, the robotics, the 3D printing, control systems, it brings it all together, and it's going to result in a pretty awesome project, I think. At the same time, I also wanted to add my own spin on it. So a lot of you know I've taken that approach where I've got 4 motors, and we're kind of doing all-wheel drive, true all-wheel drive, where we can control each individual wheel using software. And I haven't seen that anywhere in an RC car. Obviously it exists in other places, and I've done projects in the past that kind of implement a similar thing, but with 2-wheel drive. And I really do think there's huge potential there. We'll find out very soon because the car is close to being built and tested, but we won't know for sure until we test it out. Question 7. What 3D printer materials would you like to try and why? As I said before, I kind of stick to what I need as opposed to things I like to experiment with. Maybe I should change a little bit on that. Maybe I should experiment with other filaments, but if I had to choose some, I'd probably want to try flexible filament, because that's just pretty cool. Who doesn't want to try that? I definitely want to try nylon. Polycarbonate is the other one, which I've recently been playing around with, and that's super interesting. And it's really cool to see the difference in properties between different materials and what kind of applications they can be used in. Question 8. What got you into making, and when did you decide to start sharing your projects? I got into making when I was probably around 18, which is quite late really. You know, I hadn't had much exposure to this hardware and software kind of stuff till I really got to university. And as soon as I got into university, I was kind of bombarded with this stuff, and I just fascinated by it. You know, it just kind of blew me away what you could achieve using hardware and software. Your average kind of person today, they look at something like an iPhone or any kind of phone, and they always kind of take it for granted. You know, they just expect it to work, and people have this mindset of they just expect things to keep getting better, and they don't always appreciate what we've already got and the work that goes into what we got. And I always kind of thought of it like that, and I always kind of asked those questions, you know, like, how does this thing work? What's inside it that makes it function? How can I replicate something like that? And when you start asking those kind of questions, you really dive deep into this rabbit hole of more questions, and you can branch out in so many different places. As I said, as soon as I saw the potential of hardware and software, and that you can solve problems with it and program this software to complete a task, it just blew my mind. And I think a lot of people on my course kind of felt the same way as well. But I kind of took that into my own personal projects as well. And that's kind of where this stuff came from. The reason I started sharing the projects was because I've always kind of done them anyway, right? And I kind of just thought to myself, well, there's not many people in my life who are that interested in what I'm doing. And I don't really have that kind of reach in the real world to inspire other people or, you know, teach people how to get involved in this kind of thing. So I'd seen people obviously sharing their projects on YouTube and that kind of thing. So I just thought, that's a great way to do it. If I'm going to be doing these projects anyway on my own, I might as well share it. And if that then can inspire even one person or help one person learn something new, then ultimately I thought, you know, it was worth it. Another big part of that as well was to get some feedback. When you kind of leave university and you haven't got your lecturers and your tutors telling you, you should do this, you should look into this, you're kind of just left on your own, and you can explore whatever you want to explore. I feel like the YouTube videos and the comments I get through Instagram and that kind of thing is a great feedback loop, because I always try and keep in mind that there are people out there that know a lot more than me and I can learn from them. I think it's really important to stay in that mindset, you know, especially as a creator. I do a lot of teaching in my videos where I'm sharing information, and it's important that that information is accurate and correct, but also I'm of the mindset that I don't know everything either. Yeah, and that's what the comments provide me. Some people, not all, offer kind of genuine criticism and advice on how I could do something better. And I love that, because it helps me learn, it helps me know what to look for and kind of explore more things. Question 9, what is your favourite tool? Well, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. It has to be the 3D printer. The potential there with a 3D printer is just insane. It's so big that you can't really put it into words. You know, you can quite literally design anything in CAD and 3D print it. The downside is you're kind of limited in terms of your materials with strength and that kind of thing, which is also why I've kind of gone down that CNC route. I'm definitely at the early stages of the CNC journey, basic materials, wood, that kind of thing. But you've got to start somewhere, and eventually I'm going to go on, start playing around with metals, get newer, bigger CNC machines, and take on more ambitious projects. And that's kind of the goal for me. Question 11. How long did it take you to learn about car chassis design? This is something I kind of wanted to address, really, is that I don't really know a lot about car chassis design. When I started the project, I had no idea even how a dual wishbone suspension system worked. I really had no idea. This project is just a result of trying, failing, and trying something else. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm just failing really, really quickly, correcting it, implementing better solutions, and slowly but surely you end up at some kind of result. I think a lot of people, especially when they're discovering my project now, when it's been going on for 6-7 months, they kind of assume that I have all this knowledge about cars and suspension and chassis, and I really don't. I'm just doing my best to try and build something that works. And I think that's the approach you should take with anything. You've got to start somewhere. Nobody knows everything. I wish a lot more people thought like that, because a lot of people get put off, especially because they think they're nowhere near the kind of barrier where you need to be in terms of knowledge for a particular project. If everybody thought like that, we really wouldn't get anywhere. And you have to step out of your comfort zone and try and learn something new. And that's kind of what the Raptor 2 project has been all about. Question 12. For your CAD projects, where do you get 3D models such as motors and shock absorbers? Basically, I design everything myself. It is difficult, but again, the reason I decide to do that is to learn. By trying to design challenging things, you just pick up so many more CAD skills that you're always better off because of it. And that's kind of what I always try and tell everyone who's trying to learn CAD. People always ask me, how can I learn CAD? What's my advice to them to improve, and what should they design? Truth is, you should design anything you can see lying around. Like, for example, I've got this kind of screwdriver thing here for a socket set, and try and design that. Find something you've got around, take a look at it, measure it up, and you've got to ask yourself these questions about the process that you go through in order to design something like this. There's a certain number of steps you have to take in a certain order, and that's all CAD is. It's about knowing what steps you need to take and in what order, and it's always the same. And that's what I love about CAD, is once you pick up those skills, you can apply it to anything. My advice for anyone would be to buy one of these. This is a digital caliber, and what you can do basically is, it's like a ruler, just an electronic version, and you can measure things. And that's all I always do. I take something, they're not 100% accurate, but they're as good as, right? You take all those measurements, write them down, you create your parameters, and just start to build it. And you're going to learn, you're going to do it wrong, and you learn from that. But that's how the process is. There's no shortcuts, unfortunately. You just have to try, fail, and try again. And that's the truth of it. Question 13. Is a heated bed on a 3D printer important? Yes, I'd say a heated bed is very important, but it obviously depends what you're trying to print. If, for example, you're trying to print PETG, you are definitely going to need a heated bed. You can get away sometimes with PLA. If you're doing small prints, you can get away without using a heat bed if you're using some kind of adhesive like glue or hairspray, something like that. But you are way more susceptible to warping without using a heat bed, and that's kind of why they exist. A great example of that is on my Creality CR10S behind me. I typically love to print in PETG, but I've been having a lot of trouble with that printing in PETG because it doesn't quite have enough power there to heat up that large heat bed. So one of the things I'm going to need to do to that is upgrade the heat bed, and a lot of people have done that. And that just ensures that you've got a nice consistent temperature across the whole bed that stops warping from happening. And what you'll find is warping is really the biggest problem you're going to face if you decide not to have a heat bed. Question 14. I'd like to become a maker and start sharing content. Any tips? Best bit of advice I think I could offer anybody who's trying to share their own projects and inspire other people is to always just do the projects that you want to do, right? And I've kind of struggled a bit with this lately because my channel kind of has gone through these phases. If you look back over the videos over the years, a bit of machine learning when I first started, that was more kind of just to get used to the camera and that kind of thing. And then I went on to 3D printing. Then I've gone on to the Raptor project, which is still ongoing. And now I'm slowly transitioning over to the CNC stuff. A problem you're always going to come across is that when people find you through your videos, they come from different audiences, right? And some people want to see more RC stuff. Some people want to see more 3D printing stuff. And obviously then there's the other people that are into the CNC stuff and they want more videos like that. Now what I've tried to always keep in mind is I'm always going to do the projects that I want to do, and you shouldn't ever let your audience kind of push you one way or the other. Now, if you're asking for feedback, that's a completely different scenario. But if you're sat there wondering what project to do next, make sure you always go with what you want to do. Ultimately you are going down your own path and sharing that. And that's something that I'm doing. One thing people always assume with YouTube or social media content is that the people that are pursuing it are in it for the money. And in some cases that's true. But what I can tell you is the money doesn't come for a long time. So it's important that you're doing it for the right reasons as well. Make sure you're passionate about whatever you're talking about, and make sure you're genuinely interested in it, because one thing I can say is that the money isn't going to come for a long time. It will come eventually, and this channel is starting to pick up slowly and kind of branch out and reach more people, but it's still a long way off being anything really profitable. The last bit of advice I'd probably offer is to not be afraid of the camera, right? When I first started, you can go back and watch my old videos. You always seem uncomfortable on the camera. It's quite alien to actually set up a camera, sit down and speak to it. It takes a lot of getting used to feel comfortable doing that. Only in the last probably 6 months have I felt more comfortable doing it, but it's one of those things that only comes with practice. Anybody you watch will have been through those uncomfortable situations as well. And again, it comes back to that mindset of, usually when you find somebody on YouTube or somebody you enjoy watching, you're finding them a few years into their career or their particular path, and you aren't seeing the start of their journey. This channel is less than 2 years old. It's a year and a half actually, and it's early days. It's still such a small channel, and I've got a lot of growing and learning to do myself. But if you go back and look at my old videos, I've come a long way since back then. So you need to kind of look at it as this personal development as well. Be critical about yourself and your videos, but don't be too harsh either. As long as you're kind of improving each time and making those adjustments, ultimately you're going to end up making better videos, and that's important. To kind of summarize those, my first bit of advice would be to always do the projects that you want to do. The second piece of advice would be to make sure you're in it for the right reasons. And finally, the third bit of advice is don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to get in front of the camera. Question 15 is, which 3D printers are you using? I have two 3D printers. The first one obviously is the Prusa i3 Mark III's, and the second one is the one behind me here, which is the Creality CR10S. My favourite is definitely the Prusa, just because it's so hassle-free. You can absolutely pump out as many prints as you want on that thing. It just never gives up, and it's so consistent. And that's why that one's my favourite. Another fantastic printer that I have here is the Creality CR10S. What I'll say about that one is it's fantastic for the likes of PLA, but as soon as you start stepping up to those materials that require a hotter heat bed, you start running into trouble with warping, especially PETG and anything beyond that. And maybe that's just my experience personally, but I can only share with you my own experiences. The final question, question 16. What is the best starter 3D printer? Honestly, I would say if you've got the money, go for a Prusa Mark III. Maybe hold off because there's probably a Mark IV around the corner, or maybe even the Prusa XL. We'll see how it goes. But if you just want to get your hands on your first printer and you want to start playing around, go for the Prusa Mini. The value you get there for your money is honestly incredible. They're half the cost of a regular Prusa. They're around the same cost as one of these CR10S's, but again, with Prusa, you tend to get, it's kind of an experience thing, right? You get to build the printer, you get to have much more reliable software, and the prints 9 times out of 10, they're going to come out a lot better than they would on something like the machine behind me. So that's it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, something a little bit different. Hopefully I answered a lot of the questions that you were interested in. I will be doing one of these again, so if you want to ask me more questions in the future, go and follow me on Instagram. And what I always do is I put a story up on my Instagram, and it has a little box on there where you can submit a question. And I keep track of all these questions so that when I make the next video, hopefully I'll answer it. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.